Chapter 2, Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. Establishment of Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. The central government shall by notification establish a body to be known as the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India to exercise the powers conferred on and to perform the functions assigned to it under this act. The food authority shall be a body corporate by the name aforesaid, having perpetual succession and a seal with power to acquire, hold and dispose of property both movable and immovable, and to contract, and shall by the said name sue or be sued. The head office of the food authority shall be at Delhi. The food authority may establish its offices at any other place in India. Composition of food authority and qualifications for appointment of its chairperson and other members. The food authority shall consist of a chairperson and the following 22 members, out of which one third shall be women, namely 7 members not below the rank of a joint secretary to the government of India, to be appointed by the central government to respectively represent the ministries or departments of the central government dealing with agriculture, commerce, consumer affairs, food processing, health, legislative affairs, small scale industries, who shall be members ex officio, two representatives from food industry, of which one shall be from small scale industries, two representatives from consumer organizations, three eminent food technologists or scientists, five members to be appointed by rotation every 3 years, one each in seriatim from the zones as specified in the first schedule to represent the states and the union territories, two person to represent farmers organizations, one person to represent retailers organizations. The chairperson and other members of the food authority shall be appointed in such a manner so as to secure the highest standards of competence, broad range of relevant expertise, and shall represent the broadest possible geographic distribution within the country. The chairperson shall be appointed by the central government from amongst the person of eminence in the field of food science, or from amongst the persons from the administration who have been associated with the subject and is either holding or has held the position of not below the rank of secretary to the government of India. The chairperson and the members other than the ex officio members of the food authority shall be appointed by the central government on the recommendations of the selection committee. The chairperson or members other than ex officio members of the food authority shall not hold any other office. Selection committee for selection of chairperson and members of food authority. The central government shall, for the purpose of selection of the chairperson and the members other than ex officio members of the food authority, constitute a selection committee consisting of cabinet secretary as chairperson, secretary in charge of the ministry or the department responsible for the administration of this act as the convener member, secretary in charge of the ministries of the department of the central government dealing with health, legislative and personal members, uh, chairman of the public enterprise selection board as member, an eminent food technologist to be nominated by the central government as member. Explanation: for the purpose of clause E, the central government shall nominate a person from amongst persons holding the post of director or the head by whatever name called, or of any national research or technical institution. The central government shall within 2 months from the date of occurrence of any vacancy by reason by death, resignation or removal of the chairperson or a member of the food authority, and 3 months before the superannuation or completion of the term of office of the chairperson or any member of that authority, make a reference to the selection committee for filling up of the vacancy. The selection committee shall finalize the selection of the chairperson and the members of the food authority within 2 months from the date on which the reference is made to it. The selection committee shall recommend a panel of two names for every vacancy referred to it. Before recommending any person for appointment as a chairperson or member of the food authority, the selection committee shall satisfy itself that such person does not have any financial or other interest which is likely to affect prejudicially his function as a member. No appointment of the chairperson or other member of the food authority shall be invalid merely by reason of any vacancy in the selection committee. Terms of office, salary, allowances, and other conditions of service of chairperson and members of food authority. The chairperson and the members other than the ex officio members shall hold office for a term of 3 years from the date on which they enter upon their offices and shall be eligible for reappointment for a further period of 3 years, provided that the chairperson shall not hold office as such after he has attained the age of 65 years. In the case of the chairperson, the age of 65 years, and in the case of a member, the age of 62 years. The salary and allowances payable to other terms and conditions of service of the chairperson and members other than ex officio members shall be such as may be prescribed by the central government. The chairperson and every member shall, before entering upon his office, make and subscribe to an oath of office and of secrecy in such form and in such manner, and before such authority as may be prescribed by the central government. Notwithstanding anything contained in subsection, the chairperson or any member may relinquish his office by giving in writing to the central government a notice of not less than 3 months, or be removed from his office in accordance with the provision of section 8. The chairperson or any member ceasing to hold office as such shall not represent any person before the food authority or any state authority in any manner. Removal of chairperson and members of food authority. Notwithstanding anything contained in subsection 1 of section 7, the central government may, by order, remove from office the chairperson or any other member if the chairperson, or as the case may be, such other member has been adjudged in an insolvent or has been convicted of an offence which, in the opinion of the central government, involves moral turpitude, or has become physically or mentally incapable of acting as a member, or has acquired such financial or other interests as is likely to affect prejudicially his functions as a member, or has so abused his position as to render his continuance in office prejudicial to the public interest. No members shall be removed under clause D and E of subsection 1 unless he has been given a reasonable opportunity of being heard in the matter. Officers and other employees of food authority. There shall be a chief executive officer of the food authority not below the rank of additional secretary to the government of India, who shall be the member secretary of the authority to be appointed by the central government. The food authority may, with the approval of the central government, determine the number, nature, and categories of other officers and employees required to the food authority in the discharge of its functions. The salaries and allowances payable to and other conditions of service of the CEO, officers, and other employees shall be such as may be specified by regulations of the food authority with the approval of the central government. Functions of the CEO. The CEO shall be the legal representative of the food authority and shall be responsible for the day-to-day administration of the food authority, drawing up of proposal for the food authority's work programs in consultation with the central advisory committee, implementing the work programs and the decisions adopted by the food authority, ensuring the provision of appropriate scientific, technical, and administrative support for the scientific committee and the scientific panel, ensuring that the food authority carries out its tasks in accordance with the requirement of its users, in particular with regard to the adequacy of the services provided and the time taken, the preparation of the statement of revenue and expenditure, and the execution of the budget of the food authority, and developing and maintaining contact with the central government, and for ensuring a regular dialogue with its relevant committees, Every year, the CEO shall submit to the Food Authority for approval a general report covering all the activities of Food Authority in the previous year, programs of work, the annual accounts for the previous year, and the budget for the coming year. The CEO shall, following adoption by the Food Authority, forward the general report and the programs to the central government and the state governments and shall have them published. The CEO shall approve all financial expenditure of the Food Authority and report on the authority's activities to the central government. The CEO shall exercise the power of the Commissioner of Food Safety while dealing with matters relating to food safety of such articles. The CEO shall have administrative control over the officers and other employees of the Food Authority. Central Advisory Committee. The Food Authority shall, by notification, establish a committee to be known as the Central Advisory Committee. The Central Advisory Committee shall consist of two members each to represent the interest of food authority, agriculture, consumers, relevant research bodies and food laboratories and all commissioners of food safety, and the chairperson of the scientific committee shall be ex officio member. The representatives of the concerned ministries or departments of the central government in agriculture, animal husbandry and dairying, biotechnology, commerce and industry, consumer affairs, environment and forests, food processing industries, health, Panchayati Raj, small scale industries, and food and public distribution or government institutes or organizations and government recognized farmers shall be invited to the deliberations of the Central Advisory Committee. The CEO shall be ex officio chairperson of the Central Advisory Committee. The Central Advisory Committee shall follow such rules of procedures, including its transaction of business as may be specified by regulations, functions of Central Advisory Committee. The Central Advisory Committee shall ensure close cooperation between the Food Authority and the enforcement agencies and organizations operating in the field of food. The Central Advisory Committee shall advise the Food Authority on the performance of its duties under this section and in particular in drawing up of a proposal for the Food Authority's work program on the prioritization of work, identifying potential risks, pooling of knowledge, and such other functions as may be specified by regulations. The Central Advisory Committee shall meet regularly at the invitation of the chairperson of Central Advisory Committee or at the request of at least one third of its members and not less than three times a year. Scientific panels. The Food Authority shall establish scientific panels which shall consist of independent scientific experts. The scientific panel shall invite the relevant industry and consumer representatives in its deliberations without prejudice to the provisions of subsection 1. The Food Authority may establish as many scientific panels as it considers necessary in addition to the panels on food additives, flavorings, processing aids, and materials in contact with food, pesticides and antibiotics residues, genetically modified organisms and foods, functional foods, nutraceuticals, dietetic products and other similar products, biological hazards, contaminants in the food chain, labeling and method of sampling and analysis. The Food Authority may from time to time reconstitute the scientific panels by adding new members or by omitting the existing members or by changing the name of the panels as the case may be. Scientific Committee. The Food Authority shall constitute scientific committee which shall consists of the chairperson of the scientific panels and six independent scientific experts not belonging or affiliated to any of the scientific panels. The scientific committee shall be responsible for providing the scientific opinions to the Food Authority and shall have powers where necessary for of organizing public hearings. The scientific committee shall be responsible for the general coordination necessary to ensure consistency of the scientific opinion, procedure and in particular with regard to the adoption of working procedures and harmonization of working methods of the scientific panels. The scientific committee shall provide opinions on multisectoral issues falling within the competence of more than one scientific panel and on issues which do not fall within the competence of any of the scientific panels wherever necessary, and particularly in the case of subjects which do not fall within the competence of any of the scientific panel. The scientific committee shall set up working groups and in such cases it shall draw on the expertise of those working groups when establishing scientific opinions, procedure for scientific committee and scientific panel. The members of the scientific committee who are not members of the scientific panel and members of the scientific panel shall be appointed by the food authority for a period of 3 years, which shall be renewable for such period, and the vacancy notice shall be published in the relevant leading scientific publications and on the food authority's website for a call for expressions of interest. The scientific committee and the scientific panel shall each choose a chairperson from amongst their members. The scientific committee and the scientific panel shall act by a majority of their members, and the views of the members shall be recorded. The procedure for the operation and cooperation of the scientific committee and the scientific panel shall be specified by regulations. These procedures shall relate in particular to the number of times that a member can serve consecutively on a scientific committee or scientific panel, the number of members in each scientific panel, the procedure for reimbursing the expenses of members of the scientific committee and the scientific panel, the manner in which tasks and requests for scientific opinions are assigned to the scientific committee and the scientific panel, the creation and organization of the working groups of the scientific committee and the scientific panel, and the possibility of external experts being included in those working groups, the possibility of observers being invited to meetings of the scientific committee and the scientific panel, the possibility of organizing public hearings and the quorum of the meeting notice, agenda of the meeting, and such other matters. Duties and functions of food authority. It shall be the duty of the food authority to regulate and monitor the manufacture, processing, distribution, sale, and import of food so as to ensure safe and wholesome food. Without prejudice to the provision of subsection 1, the food authority may by regulations specify the standard and guidelines in relation to articles of food, specifying an appropriate system for enforcing various standards notified under this act, the limits for using food additives, crop contaminants, pesticide residues, residues of veterinary drugs, heavy metals, processing aids, mycotoxins, antibiotics, and pharmacological active substances, and irradiation of food. The mechanisms and guidelines for accreditation of certification bodies engaged in certification of food safety management systems for food businesses, the procedure and the enforcement of quality control in relation to any article of food imported into India, the procedure and guidelines for accreditation of laboratories and notification of the accredited laboratories, the method of sampling analysis and exchange of information among enforcement authorities, conduct surveys of enforcement and administration of this act in the country, food labeling standards including claims on health, nutrition, special dietary uses, and food category systems for foods, and manner in which the procedure subject to which risk analysis, risk assessment, risk communication, and risk management shall be undertaken. The food authority shall also provide scientific advice and technical support to the central government and the state governments in matter of framing the policy and rules in areas which have a direct or indirect bearing on food safety and nutrition. Search, collate, analyze, and summarize relevant scientific and technical data, particularly relating to food consumption and the exposure of individuals to risks related to the consumption of food, incidence and prevalence of biological risk, contaminants in food, residues of various contaminants, identification of emerging risks, and introduction of rapid alert systems. Promote, coordinate, and issue guidelines for the development of risk assessment methodologies and monitor and conduct and forward messages on the health and nutritional risks of food to the central government, state governments, and commissioners of food safety. Provide scientific and technical advice and assistance to the central government and the state governments in implementation of crisis management procedures with regard to food safety, and to draw up a general plan for crisis management and work in close cooperation with the crisis unit set up by the central government in this regard. Establish a system of network of organizations with the aim to facilitate a scientific cooperation framework by the coordination of activities, the exchange of information, the development and implementation of joint projects, the exchange of expertise and best practices in the fields within the food authority's responsibility, provide scientific and technical assistance to the central government and state government for improving cooperation with international organizations, take all steps to ensure that the public, consumers, interested parties, and all levels of panchayats receive rapid, reliable, objective, and comprehensive information through appropriate measures, methods, and means, provide, whether within or outside their area, training programs in food safety and standards for persons who are to intend to become involved in food businesses, whether as food business operators or employees or otherwise, undertake any other task assigned to it by the central government to carry out the objects of this act, contribute to the development of international technical standards for food sanitary and phytosanitary standards, contribute where relevant and appropriate to the development of agreement on recognition of the equivalence of specific food related measures, promote coordination of work on food standards undertaken by international governmental and non-governmental organizations, promote consistency between international technical standards and domestic food standards while ensuring that the level of protection adopted in the country is not reduced, and promote general awareness as to food safety and food standards. The foods authority shall make it public without undue delay the opinions of the scientific committee and the scientific panel immediately after adoption. The annual declarations of interests made by the members of the food authority, the CEO, members of the advisory committee, and the members of the scientific committee and scientific panel, as well as the declarations of interest, if any, made in relation to items on the agendas of meetings, the result of its scientific studies, and the annual report of its activities. The food authority may from time to time give such directions on matter relating to food safety and standards. The commissioner of food safety, who shall be bound by such directions while exercising his powers under the act. The food authority shall not disclose or cause to be disclosed or to third parties confidential information that it receives for which confidential treatment has been requested and has been exceeded, except for information which must be made public if circumstances so require in order to protect public health. Proceedings of the food authority. The food authority shall meet at the head office or any of its offices at such time as the chairpersons may direct, and shall observe such rules of procedure in regard to the transaction of business at its meetings, including the quorum of its at its meetings, as may be specified by regulations. If the chairperson is unable to attend a meeting of the food authority, any other member nominated by the chairperson in this behalf, and in the absence of such nomination, or where there is no chairperson, the members chosen by the members present from amongst themselves shall preside at the meeting. All questions which come up before any meeting of the food authority shall be decided by a majority of votes of the members present and voting, and in the event of an equality of votes, the chairperson or the person presiding over the meeting shall have the right to exercise a second or casting vote. All orders and decisions of the food authority shall be authenticated by the CEO. The CEO shall take part in the meetings of the food authority but without a right to vote. The food authority may invite the chairperson of the scientific committee to attend its meetings but without a right to vote. No act or proceedings of the food authority shall be questioned or invalidated merely on the ground of existence of any vacancy or defect of in the constitution of food authority.